It seems like beginner DJs still struggle to understand what the Beatgrids are, what are they used for, and why do they need to set them. Let's solve it once and for all. Let me first show you how the Beatgrid looks in Traktor. As you can see here, I have vertical lines every 4 beats. So if you look to the right over here, they determine where every downbeat would happen if the track had just a regular kick on every tap of the metronome. So let me mute everything except for drums for easier representation and play the track. As you've just heard, vertical lines fall on every downbeat in this loop. It might happen that you haven't even heard about Beatgrids up to this point, because Traktor is actually really good at determining Beatgrids automatically without any intervention from the user. So why Beatgrids are important? First of all, sync button. Now before you start holy wars in the comments, I'm all for the sync. Why? Because I usually play with 3 or 4 decks at the same time, and in my opinion, I'd rather spend my time on doing creative mixing than worrying about my tracks being in sync. I can also utilize this time to better pick my next track, which in my opinion, 80% of the success of the DJ is actually picking the next track. It's not your sync button, it's not your creative skills, it's just picking the right track at the right time. People won't care about your beat matching if you choose the right track. Now coming back to the topic of sync, let's hear an example where Beatgrids are set right and I'm using a sync. I will launch 2 loops and sync them together. As you can hear, the loops stay in perfect sync with each other. Now let me give you another example where your Beatgrid is not set right on the left track. I will start the right track and then play the left track afterwards. As you can hear, it's complete mess. So make sure to set your Beatgrids right. Why else would you need the Beatgrid? Well, Traktor effects. Traktor effects are linked to the particular BPM and also the downbeats. Let me give you an example using Beat Masher, the very popular effect. On the left deck, my Beatgrid is set properly, and I'm going to activate Beat Masher as the track goes by. As you can hear, everything sounds okay. Now let's say my Beatgrid is not right. I will do the same thing, but with not the right Beatgrid. As you can hear, it doesn't sound right. It doesn't know where to link the first downbeat and how to get this effect to properly work. Same applies to the other Traktor BPM and Beatgrid based effects, like for example various types of delay. There is another use case where you will need the Beatgrid, and this is when you jump between hotcues. First of all, make sure you see the top section over here. If you don't see it, go to Preferences, Global Settings, and Show Global Section. Over here in the middle, you will see 2 buttons, Snap and Quantize. Let's focus on the Quantize. If Quantize is on and track is playing, and then you press on a hotkey, it will jump to this hotkey and also make sure that the timing is right. Let me show you. I will play this track and then jump to the first hotkey. No matter how often I will click my hotkey, Traktor will only jump on every downbeat. If I now disable Quantize over here and play the track and try doing the same thing, the behavior will be quite different. As you can hear, in this example, Traktor doesn't prevent me to do whatever I want with a hotkey. So this is quite convenient, and I keep my Quantize almost all the time on, so that when I jump between parts of the track, my timing is perfect. So in case it's your first time loading the track into the deck, you might see the picture like this, where Traktor determines all the transients within the track. Then Traktor, depending on your settings, which we will talk a bit later, will determine your BPM, meaning your tempo. Depending on a tempo, it will then use an algorithm to determine your beat grid. In case your track doesn't have a beat grid, you can go over here to Grid and press Auto. As you can see, the beat grid was perfectly determined by Traktor. I'm currently in preparation view over here, so if you don't see this sub-menu at the bottom, you can click several times at the title of the track, and eventually you will see this menu. Just make sure to click Grid. Now let's talk what makes Traktor determine the beat grids correctly for your use case. Let's go into Preferences and cover important settings that affect your beat grids. First of all, in the file management, make sure you toggle this setting to analyze new tracks when loading into the deck, or analyze newly imported tracks. This makes sure that Traktor analyzes your tracks upfront and you don't need to worry about beat grids later. The most important settings for your beat grids are within the Analyze options. Let's start with these two toggles. Set beat grid when detecting BPM. This makes sure that when Traktor analyzes a track or when the track is loaded into the deck, it will analyze and set the beat grid. If you don't toggle this option, you will end up with this view where Traktor just analyzes the transients but doesn't set the beat grid. Second option is to store beat marker as a hotkey. This one is up to you to decide, but I prefer to toggle it. This is because if I go back to my track view, you can see that the first hotkey is of white color, which means it is a beat grid hotkey. I find it very convenient because when I play the track and then I want to jump back to the beginning, I can just press the first hotkey and I always know it's where my track starts. Lastly, there is a BPM range, which is the very most important setting. BPM range helps Traktor to understand what is your expected BPM. Let's say, for example, you play Deep House. Most of the tracks in Deep House are from the 110 BPM to 130 BPM. So setting this option to be, for example, from 78 to 155 will make sure that Traktor would target this BPM range in order to set the beat grid. Let me provide you an example for better explanation. My range is set from 68 to 135. Now let me go to the track and see that my track is 100 BPM. I for sure know that it is 100 BPM. So if I click Auto, the Traktor will indeed set the beat grid to 100 BPM. But let me go back to Preferences and set this BPM range to be from 128 to 255, which is way above the range of my target BPM. What would happen in this case if I reanalyze my beat grid by clicking Auto over here is Traktor essentially doubled the beat grid, because it understood the transients, but the range was way above, so the closest it can get is 200, so it essentially doubled. This is particularly useful if, for example, you're playing drum and bass, where most of the tracks might fall into 180 BPM range. Therefore, you would set over here the range to be from 128 to 255, and then Traktor most of the times will get your beat grids right. Now, what would happen if Traktor doesn't analyze your beat grid correctly and your BPM is not right? You can guide Traktor by tapping this button. In 99% of the cases, you will not use this feature, but in case you need to fix your beat grids and BPM, this is the one you would use as your first resort. So what I'm going to do is just listen along the track and press the step button on every downbeat that I hear as a human being. As you can see, the Traktor was guided, and now the BPM is correct of 100 BPM, and the beat grid is right. You need to click this tab button only 4 times for Traktor to pick up your beat grid. Now let's say even this approach didn't help. Well, your final resort is just resetting your Beatgrid, find the first transient that you would classify as a downbeat, put your play marker position on this downbeat, click this button over here which sets the Beatgrid at this position, and then press and hold on this value in the middle while dragging it up or down in order to increase or decrease the BPM until it matches perfectly with your downbeats. You can keep going back and forth until you get it perfectly right. One setting that might help you with this is within the transport section and mouse control. Set it to snap, which would make sure that when you click on every transient, if the track is not analyzed, or every grid line, the track is gonna snap to this position. So for example, if I click over here on any transient, the track is going to jump on particularly this position. So now I click around, I find the transient which I know is the first downbeat, click on it, the track jumps and snaps to particularly this transient, and I click Set the Beatgrid. Everything is done. Just to wrap it all up, I know this topic might be trivial. It is important to make sure that your Beatgrids and BPMs are set right before going on the dance floor. You will be confident that everything will work perfectly when it's needed. Lastly, let's touch a topic of flexible Beatgrids. Let's say you play old hip-hop tracks or maybe live recordings. This is what you need flexible Beatgrids for. The Beatgrid, which can adjust to different fluctuations between imperfections of the beat. Traktor doesn't have this feature currently, though it is on a roadmap, and probably sometime in the future they will deliver it, and I'll make another video on how to use it. Also, for you to know, some of the other DJ software do have flexible Beatgrids, so if it is a must for you and you want to use Traktor, you will have to wait until Native Instruments releases flexible Beatgrids for Traktor. That's been it, and I hope this video solves the Beatgrid questions once and for all. It is something that you need to do, but you need to do it properly just once.